Good morning. Today is the 19th day of Tishrei, the 5th day of Sukkot, and the 4th of October. And we're up to the 4th reading we're on Wednesdays, we're on the 4th reading of Bracha, of Vezot Bracha. And today the reading is on the three tribes, Zebulun, Yissachar, and Gad. We're only going to have time for Zebulun and Yissachar, and actually this is probably one of the most well-known verses in Jewish tradition. It's so well known because it describes a connection that has become a staple in Jewish life. So let's see the verse that I'm referring to and delve into it. So we begin with this verse, Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 18, and it reads, "To Zebulun he said," Moses blessed him like this, "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your outings, and Yissachar in your tents." And who are these Zebulun and Yissachar? They are the fifth and sixth children of Leah. And as we'll see in a moment, they have a very strong connection from birth already. So Yissachar doesn't get a individual blessing. His blessing is already rolled into Zebulun's blessing. And the connection is like this, that Zebulun was a merchant. His symbol, the symbol of the tribe, each of the tribes had a banner. So the symbol of the tribe of Zebulun was a ship sailing on the waters. And where did they live? Their land, their inheritance, was in the northern part of Israel, on the coast. Now, if you look at any maps that try to convey where each of the tribes was, you might see some maps that mistakenly picture them as a landlocked tribe. But they weren't. This is completely incorrect. They lived in the area that today is what we call Haifa, the city of Haifa, which actually is a very ancient city. I think it existed even at the time of the conquest of the land of Canaan. So they lived there. Their blessing from Jacob, the original blessings that they received from Jacob before he passed on, and this is in Genesis 49:13. So he said to them, "Zebulun shall dwell by the seashore. He shall be a haven for ships, and his flank," meaning his right side, if you look at him like he's facing the waters, so his right side is his most northern side, shall rest on Sidon. Sidon is a city in Lebanon. So that was the area that they inhabited. And they're right on the ocean. And even today, in modern Israel, that area is the most seafaring area of the country. The reason is the natural harbor that is there, both in Haifa, where it's a very big harbor, and also in what they call Acre or Akko, which also has a natural harbor. So those two cities were the main cities of Zebulun. The word Zebulun itself means to provide. It means, today, there's a very interesting word. It comes from it, zevel. Zevel means trash, but really what it means is that it's what is provided for the field to make it grow better, make the produce grow better. Now, Yissachar was inland from Zebulun, so they were on the same northern area, but they were inland. They were landlocked. They were inside. What was Yissachar involved in? So we know that they brought out 200 heads of Sanhedrin. It says in the book of Chronicles. They were very much invested in Torah, in studying Torah, and particularly what they're well known for is their understanding of science. And so they were the original tribe that was involved in connecting the knowledge of the world with the Torah. And so one of their most important topics was astronomy, and the reason they were so sought after was because they knew how to make the calculations to know when the new moon would be. We've talked about this in the past, that even though the new moon is consecrated by eyewitnesses, meaning we have to have people who see the new moon, in practice, the calculations of where the new moon could be seen and at what time had to be made before the eyewitnesses were seen, because they had to question them about exactly where it was. And the Sanhedrin, the judges, had to know whether the answers from the eyewitnesses actually made any kind of sense. So they actually had to calculate it first. And Yissachar was known, the tribe Yissachar was known for keeping these secrets of the calculations. And most of what had to do with the Jewish year was decided by scholars from the tribe of Yissachar. And we said that they were the fifth and sixth children of Leah. Right? Jacob had 4 women. 2 of them were sisters. The other 2 were also sisters, but they weren't all sisters. There were 2 sets of twins, Leah and Rachel, and Zilpah and Bilhah. And Leah bore him altogether 6 children and a daughter. So Yissachar and Zebulun, in that order, first Yissachar, then Zebulun, were born as the 5th and 6th children, the final boys from Leah. And how did this come about? So this is very important to understand why one became a merchant and the other became a scholar. And we haven't yet talked about the connection between them, which we'll now do after we see how they were born. So we go back to Genesis chapter 30, verses 14 and on. And there it says like this: Once at the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben, who is Leah's oldest son, the firstborn of Jacob, came upon some mandrakes. Now they're called mandrakes, even in English, because they come from the word man. Literally, drake also has something to do with procreation. I don't know exactly how. But these were considered to be an aphrodisiac. They're considered to be something that facilitates getting pregnant. And so Reuben came upon some mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel, her sister, was also married to Jacob, said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." Because apparently Rachel was now almost exclusively with Jacob. He wasn't anymore with Leah. He had moved his bed to be in Rachel's tent. But Leah said to her, "Was it not enough for you to take away my husband?" Like we said, she moved the bed. "That you would also take my son's mandrakes? If I have something to lure Jacob with, you want to take it?" And Rachel replied, "I promise he shall lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." So Rachel is looking, doesn't have any children yet. She's looking for how to get pregnant. And she says for the mandrakes, which were apparently very rare, she's willing to let Leah be with him that night, even though it wasn't something that would have happened by itself. When Jacob came home from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You are to sleep with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. And then she gave birth to the 5th son, Yissachar, and immediately after that to the 6th son, Zebulun, which implies that this was all thanks to this interchange that she had with Rachel. Now, what did Leah and Rachel actually do here? What they had was what we call, they had some kind of agreement. They cooperated, but it was like business in a certain sense. So the uneasy, strange feeling that you get about it is that they're doing business over Jacob. They're having some kind of discussion, which sounds very crude even, about Jacob. Now the thing is that in Hebrew this is called masau matan. Masau matan is to have some kind of negotiation. There are 2 types of negotiation in Torah, in the Jewish world. There are the negotiations that somebody like Zebulun would do, because he was a merchant. So obviously he had many negotiations to have with the people that he bought and sold from and so on. But there's another type of negotiation which the Torah also talks about, and the sages always talk about in the sense of negotiation, which is studying Torah. Studying Torah is called negotiation, masau matan. It's the same word. It's exactly the same word. So the question is just, what are you good at? Are you more of the scholarly type, or are you more of the merchant type? But in either case, what you do is you negotiate. When you're a merchant, we understand what negotiation is. When you're a Torah scholar, the negotiation is because you have to study with someone else. You have to have a study partner, or some people might say someone to spar with. A study partner can be seen as like a abbreviation, or the words that are abbreviated in the word to spar. You need a study partner. You need someone to knock your ideas off, and somebody that will challenge you. And to get to the bottom, to get to the truth of what the Torah is saying, you have to have a tradition of sparring with a study partner. It doesn't work without this type of negotiation. And this is one of the main things that is missing from the rest of the world. I saw a little bit of this when I was in college. The people would study with study partners, but the idea that this is ingrained in the religion, that this is part of the most important commandment, the commandment to study Torah, that needs to be imparted to the rest of the world to understand that this is really what lies at the essence of connecting to God. You can't really connect to God's word. You really can't connect to the Torah unless you're willing to enter into negotiations with someone else. This same idea, by the way, so what was the connection? So what did they do? It says that Zebulun and Yissachar had an agreement between them. That's why I said it's so familiar and popular in Jewish culture. The most important agreement that people have, and many hundreds and maybe thousands of people, I know certainly dozens of them, have an agreement like this, that one of them goes out and he's the businessman, he wins the bread, and the other, they don't have to actually be brothers. A lot of times it's just neighbors or someone who you learnt with in the past, and the other one is a scholar and dedicates all his time to learning. And of course he has his own study partner with whom he negotiates. But then they make an agreement between them to split in half and half. So the scholar gives half of his learning. He doesn't physically give it because he can't give it physically, but he gives the merit of it to the merchant, and the businessman gives half of his income to the scholar. And the way that people do this, it's for real. They give half and half, meaning that if somebody makes, $10,000 a month, he will give $5,000 to the scholar. And this is one of the most beautiful relationships in the world, I think. And people go with this for their entire lives. And I've seen even when one of the partners in this relationship passes away, that the other mourns for him as if he's his brother, exactly the same way. I wanted to also mention that this exact same type of relationship is seen and echoed in the tabernacle. We don't have time to get into it today, but we see that the menorah, which represents the light of scholarship, the light of the Torah, was placed and has to be placed exactly opposite from the table of showbread. The table of showbread represents wealth. And so these two, they have to be ha-menorah nochach ha-shulchan. It's actually a verse that repeats, it's a phrase that repeats a number of times in the Torah. The menorah has to be facing the table of showbread. And together they form the connection, together they form a bond. And that bond is one of the most beautiful bonds that there can be. Understanding that there are different types of negotiation. There's negotiation in the mind, in the Torah, in scholarship, and there's negotiation that leads to breadwinning. And with that, I will say goodbye today and hope to see everyone tomorrow.